Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the ConTinual Comics Lair. This panel will discuss our favorite origin stories. I'm your host, Nancy Northcott. The Comics Lair is sponsored by Heroes Aren't Hard to Find and Heroes Convention. And we'll start by asking the panelists to briefly introduce themselves and tell us how long they've been interested in comic books. Layla, will you start?
Sure. I'm Layla Dorine. I am an LGBTQ fiction and romance author, and my first job was in a comic shop when I was 12 years old. And I was reading comics even before that. My uncle had just passed me his old ones, so probably started reading them around 8 and just never stopped.
Ange?
Hey, my name's Dr. Ange, and I can't remember a time I wasn't into comic books. I was an early reader, and I think my parents wanted to promote that, so they just fed me comics back when they only cost a quarter at the convenience store. And as you can see behind me, I have accumulated lots, and this is just a tiny little glimpse of too many dead trees that exist in my loft.
Robyn?
I've been reading comics for, I guess, about 12 or 13 years or so. I was a comic strip kid. When my dad would read the newspaper, I'd wait until he was done and grab the funnies on Sunday evenings, things like that. But like actual comic books, I didn't get into them until I was an adult. Always read like comic related things or watched comic related things like Batman animated series and things like that. But in terms of like actual comic books, not until a little later in life.
Okay, but you didn't tell us your full name.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I said Robyn.
You did, but you have another name after that one.
Oh, Robyn McGlotten.
Thank you. Steve?
Yeah, I am Steve Sellers, and I write a number of things, including comics, so that I don't tell you like where I stand on them. But beyond that, like I started when I was 8, or maybe a little bit earlier. I think probably where I technically started was with Asterix. Because I had gone on various trips and got introduced a little bit to European comics. But in terms of American comics, I want to say it was with a JSA Infinity Incorporated crossover that kind of led into like Superman and Legion of Superheroes and X-Men and various other things. And now it's pretty much been my life.
Okay. Jenny?
Hi, I'm Gini Koch. I write the Alien Catherine the Kitty Cat series for dog books. I also write under a variety of other pen names and in all lengths and genres. I've been a comics girl for a really long time, but I was allowed to read and buy Disney comics and Archie comics, but I was not allowed to read that trash. So I would stand at that rack and speed read every comic I could get my paws on while my mother and grandmother were shopping. So I've been there for a long time, but had to like read the good stuff covertly, not to insult the Archies or Lady and the Tramp or Little Lulu that I was allowed to read. I snuck the good stuff, basically.
Okay, and Jamie.
I'm J.B Garner. I write as J.B Garner. I'm a professional writer and editor, and I have been into comics practically since I can remember. I inherited it from my brother, who indoctrinated me from an early age, and I pretty much haven't stopped since.
And as I said, I'm Nancy Northcott. I write historical fantasy for False F Books. I also write several different subgenres of romance. And with Jeannie Adams, I write the Outcast Station science fiction series. I've been into comic books since I was 8 years old. My grandfather, much to my mother's future and long-lasting regret, bought me a 12-cent issue of Jimmy Olsen that had the Phantom Zone in it. And Mon-El was in that. It's my introduction to Mon-El as well. So we've all come at this from different angles, but I'm betting we all have a favorite origin story for a character or team or whatever. And so, of course, that's what we're talking about tonight. So, Ange, will you share one of your favorites with us?
Sure. I'm going to talk about the Creeper from DC Comics because I love that character, and I don't think he's loved by lots and lots of people. And I'll specifically be talking about his origin from Showcase number 73 from 1968. So this is a Steve Ditko creation. Jack Ryder is a like hard-edged, no-nonsense TV reporter, gets fired from his job, decides to become like a private investigator for that television company, is going to crash a mob costume party because he thinks that they have kidnapped a scientist. And so needs to get a costume, goes to a costume shop where all they have left are odds and ends. And so he literally has a box handed to him that has a yellow jumpsuit, green trunks, red funky boots, that shag rug that he uses as a cape, a wig. So that's crazy. He crashes this mobster's party. They have indeed kidnapped a scientist who must be like the most brilliant scientist in the world, because not only has he created a rapid healing sort of super soldier formula, meaning he's a biochemist, he also has invented a device that can make matter intangible and like out of phase with existence, so that people can be dressed in normal clothes, but then click a button and all of a sudden they're in military gear. So he also is like a quantum physicist teleportation guy. Jack Ryder, who is the Creeper's secret identity, gets stabbed at that party as he's fighting the mobsters. The scientist finds him, embeds the teleportation device in the stab wound and sews him up. So now the device is part of his body, and gives him that serum, which means that he just happened to have those things on him when he was kidnapped, which is crazy. And then that's how Jack Ryder becomes the Creeper. He then presses the button, and because he was in that costume when it was put in the wound, that costume like goes out of phase and comes into phase. And now he's also super soldiered. So he's able to like beat the snot out of people there and rescue the scientist. He's also an interesting character because he is kind of a hard-edged, no-nonsense television guy. But when he becomes the Creeper, he laughs maniacally, is really crazy, and acts much different than his regular personality, which is, I suppose, how he's able to keep his secret identity secret. But that, I think, has always been sort of an interesting part of the character. And so it's like a very weird, wild, super fast-paced first story, a lot of, I would say, late Silver Age, early Bronze Age leaps of truth that you have to just kind of roll with. But then you end up with this very, very visually striking, wild character that why everybody doesn't love him, I don't know. Like, he is beloved by me. And so any chance I get, like on a panel like this, to sing his praises, I will always sing his praises.
All right. Alidria, welcome. We've done introductions, and I'll ask you to do yours when we come around to you, as well as pick up the question, which is favorite origin stories. Robyn, what's your favorite?
I would say my favorite is The Shadow Hero by Jean Luen Yang. I try to have covers since I know a lot of my stuff is indie. I love Jean Luen Yang's work in general. This particular character is based off of what many consider the first Asian American superhero, the Green Turtle, that was created during World War II. And I learned a lot of this history from reading this comic. So aside from being just like an awesome story, it has a lot of history about Asian Americans in comic books and the history of that character and the history of Asian Americans during that time. In the back of the book, in the back matter of the book itself, it's a ton of fun. The artist Sunny Liu does an amazing job. It doesn't take itself too seriously, but also it kind of does. It gives you a lot of Chinese American history, Chinese American lore, and the mom character in it is just hilarious. The son who becomes the Green Turtle is kind of just dumbfounded by the things that his mother does, from wanting to have a son who is a superhero. So the story overall, it's a self-contained one-shot original graphic novel. It does contain some language that would be kind of sensitive that I would not recommend people to repeat in everyday conversation, but it is relevant to the context of the time that the story was written in. And it has also depictions that were, at this day and age, we're familiar about the harm of those types of depictions of Asian American characters, but part of it brings light to it and kind of humanizes the people behind those depictions. So that's one of the reasons that, aside from it just being like a ton of fun and a really great story, that this is one of my favorites.
Okay, Steve?
I think I'm going to go with a little bit more of a traditional one and go with Daredevil. And not just because he has this really awesome costume and all of this, but he's a character that has a lot of deep symbolism. I think the whole devil motif really works, especially when you're talking about a lawyer who is literally a devil's advocate. But you also get the whole angle of him being sort of this tragic character because he is the son of a boxer and a nun. And this is a man who, ends up losing his sight because he was trying to save a man who was trying to cross the street and ended up getting hit by that radioactive goo that was meant for the other person who would have otherwise hit the other person instead. So he was already starting off being very, selfless or acting out of what he thinks are selfless motives. But then you get into a lot more complexity. This is a guy who believes in the law, and mainly I think because he doesn't trust himself. So he puts a lot on the law to restrain him because he doesn't have self-control, which is a really recurring theme throughout his life, particularly when he becomes a ninja, or at least trained by a ninja cult called the Chaste. And he was not able to actually finish that training because his impulsiveness, led him to killing the man who murdered his father. And Stick, his mentor, did not like this. But he still has these skills and he still has these powers, making up with his other senses what he doesn't have with traditional sight. And so what does he do? He becomes a lawyer. He tries to defend the defenseless. And he's this character who really wants to do good. But at the same time, he has this problem deep within himself that both drives him to do the wrong thing. And so he's constantly kind of wrestling between those two. I think that's really fascinating.
Okay. Alidria, how about introduce yourself briefly and tell us when you got into comics, and then please share one of your favorite origin stories.
Hi, I'm Alidria Hurt. I'm a author of horror, fantasy, and sci-fi at this point, and I've been reading comics since I was about 6 years old. So take that for what you will, given my age. My favorite origin story. I have to admit that my favorite origin story is not a single character story, but is more like the entire premise of the X-Men. It's like we're just gonna go ahead and say that you didn't have to be radioactive by anything. There was no goo, there was no nothing. Just suddenly you hit puberty and things happened. I don't know how many other anybody else on the panel might have felt like when you hit puberty, things happened. They may not have been as spectacular, but they definitely were interesting. And that is where that's why my favorite origin stories are the X-Men origin stories, because you start with what you feel like is a totally normal life, and then it's not normal anymore, and now suddenly you have to make adjustments for the fact that things are no longer the way you thought they were.
Okay. Gini?
I have so many. We'll see if somebody else comes up with these other ones. I'm going to actually take the Fantastic Four, because they were my favorite when I was young, because for whatever reason in my small Southern California town, the only female superhero on the racks was Sue Storm. And so I was very, very attached to Sue Storm because she was the only girl. We didn't get Wonder Woman, we didn't get Batgirl, none of it. Just Fantastic Four. And there's so many different variations. I really like what they did in the movie. They all go into space and they get hit with stuff and bad stuff happens. I really liked that origin because it happens with Doctor Doom. I think most of them do. But the dynamic going in and what happens is not the dynamic that comes out. And I really love that. I mean, Sue, in the movie, Sue is dating Victor Von Doom. Reed, I have emotions, but no one knows about them. Richards is in love with her and doing nothing. Michael Chiklis has a girl that's all, oh, I love you so much. And Johnny is Johnny. I love Johnny Storm. No one gets to insult Johnny Storm. I love Johnny Storm. And they come out, and Victor is now, going lunatic. Reed is actually going to gird those loins and break down. The Ben Grimm is now turned into the thing, and Johnny is still Johnny. He's a hothead, so he becomes a Human Torch. But I really liked how they did it because, again, the going in, you have this whole dynamic, and you know what you want. You want Sue to wake up and see, yes, he's extremely handsome and incredibly wealthy and owns his own country, but he's also a jerk. And you really need to go over to the nice guy who's also brilliant and good looking and, maybe won't down the line, hit you, backhand you for some reason. So I really like that because it's like, give me any Fantastic Four origin story as long as, as long as Sue and Johnny are still on there. I was so young, though, when I read my first Fantastic Four, I couldn't figure out why Sue was in love with that really old man when she had hot Johnny right next to her. I wasn't aware they were siblings. And I'm like, Sue, the ancient old guy, right? Because Reed has silver, which indicated, he's ancient to me. When the hottie is right there, what is wrong with you? It took a few years for me to go, oh, I'm so embarrassed. Right? I was not supporting incest. So, yeah, I'll go Fantastic Four.
Okay, Jamie?
Well, despite the jacket I'm wearing, I'm not gonna lead with Carol Danvers because that would take us probably the entire panel. I am gonna go with Cassandra Cain, one of many Batgirls, and probably should be honestly is my Batgirl. Honestly, should be probably taking over the mantle of the Bat. We'll not go into that. It's an interesting character. She was introduced during one of the big event comics, No Man's Land, which had big ups and big downs, but she's a fascinating character to me in that you have this girl that is basically no one that is adopted literally by this crazy cult of assassins, and a specific crazy assassin who just has this idea: what if I raise a child from birth to see violence as language? And literally someone who just reads body motions as a language, cannot speak, doesn't understand the written word, is never taught these things, and then is groomed to be a killer. But the first time that she kills and sees what killing actually is, immediately rebels against it and basically becomes violently opposed to the very concept of killing, almost like the ideal like Bat family member. And just watching this crazy family dynamic, because she has this crazy father who's still an assassin, still booting around, who does in his twisted way love his daughter. And then you have like Bruce Wayne, who is another twisted father figure in his own ways, though much better, who decides to take her in and then starts treating her like he does with many others as a member of his family, and grooming her in his own ways. And then you have Barbara Gordon, who's Oracle at this point, taking interest to like actually humanize this young woman who cannot speak, and starts teaching her this frightening language. And you have this fascinating character that's being boiled in this alchemy of all these motivations and wants and desires, who ultimately at the end of it is actually just a really solidly moral person. And it's fascinating, struggling with handicaps because not being able to speak and understand language is crippling. And but trying to do the right thing throughout this, navigating these two warring father figures, and it's brilliant drama, really well written. Kind of falls off the rails like many comic characters do after a while, but origin-wise, fantastic.
Okay. And Layla.
Well, it's funny because I was going Batman too, but the original Robin story. Dick Grayson is my favorite Robin, and as far as I'm concerned, he's the only Robin. People can argue all they want about the ones that came after, but as a kid, when I first started reading Batman, I didn't really enjoy Batman, but I was kind of shelving these comics and came across the old Teen Titans. I mean, it's an old weathered Teen Titans copy that had Speedy and Robin, and those became my two favorite superheroes. And so I read a lot of Teen Titans and the new Teen Titans and followed them as they became Nightwing and Origin and Arsenal. And Nightwing is still like that is my go-to comic right there. But just the fact that you've got this kid whose life is, well, as normal as an acrobat in a circus, life can be, which was awesome that he wasn't just this mundane, kid that was going to school each day. He was already someone who did something that most kids didn't get to do. And then when everything happens at the circus and his parents fall and, Bruce Wayne kind of takes him in and makes him his ward, it's like, oh, okay, the rich guy, charity, blah, blah, blah. But when he discovers that Bruce Wayne is Batman and then starts training and they start weaving in, the name Robin, that's what his mom would call him when he was first learning to, fly on the trapeze. And then as you see him come into his own, where he started, like he was really the first one to start rebelling against, some of the things that Bruce does and the way that he's just so, he can be so cold and he can be so, he's embraced certain ones as his family. But as a father figure, there's moments where he's left a lot to be desired on some of the things that he's done. And I love that he raised such a strong, basically son in Grayson, that Grayson will stand up and, to him and, just do things his way and had the courage to go on his own. So that origin story, seeing where he started, which really kicked off the Titans too. Because I love Speedy equally, love him as Arsenal and all of that. So those two together are kind of my origin story go-to.
Well, I've been trying to pick among three, but after what Jamie and Layla said, I'm going to make it a Bat Family trifecta and go with Oracle. I think it was Batman Chronicles year 5 or number 5, something like that picks up with Barbara Gordon in the hospital after she's been shot by the Joker. It was written by John Ostrander and the late Kim Yale, who was his wife. And it's one of the most brilliant character overcoming catastrophe stories I've ever read. And it's a very short story. It's not like 20 some pages, but it shows Barbara Gordon struggling to make a life for herself and putting her computer skills to use and coming back from this injury. And one of the things she says to Batman was, it wasn't even about me. He just shot me to get at you. It wasn't even about me. And so that really resonated with me, that line, because that happens to a lot of characters. The comics are really big for maiming character A to cause pain to character B. It happens a lot. But the way Barbara came back from that and rebuilt her life and found a path for herself as Oracle, I think it's a brilliant story. Before we move on to the next round, though, does anybody have any questions or comments about anything that someone else mentioned as we went through?
None except to say that I love how you three picked my favorite Bat Family members of the lot of them.
Okay.
I
We
just
have good
want to say-
instincts.
Yeah. Cassandra Clare is one of my favorites too. And she was like I'm sitting there looking at them going, she's on my mind. And then you said her. So I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm just going to go with my Nightwing, go with my guy.
I was gonna say, I love Nightwing. I just like you, Layla. He is the one. But I want to mention really quickly a different Barbara origin story that I read years. It was in black and white. Okay. I cannot remember who wrote it, when it was set, but it was set, I think it was probably written in the origination golden years, right? And Barbara becomes Batgirl because she's going to a costume party. Hey, just like Angie's guy, right? She's going to a costume party and she thinks it's a kick. She's got this cape. She's going as Batgirl, right? Won't this be hilarious? And she has to fight crime on her way there and realizes that she can, and that no one knows who she is. She's in a wig. She's got all this stuff. This is a costume chance of just kind of keeping it and going on. And I just really liked that because I like Barbara's spirit in whatever she does. And it was just like, I'm good at this. I'm going to keep on doing it. I don't have superpowers and my dad is alive, but I'm still keep on doing it. So I loved that. She was one of my three that I was going to mention, but since we've been talking Barbara and the Bat Family, I think I'll throw that out right now. So
yeah, my little geek girl, glasses wearing heart, loved Barbara Gordon because she was a geek girl and she wore glasses and she kicked butt. Ange, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I actually have, I hope you'll allow me, two questions. So the first thing is for Robyn. I have never read that book, but I am a fan of Gene Yang. Have you read his new Superman book for DC?
I haven't read the most recent one. I did read Justice League of China, but I haven't read his most recent.
He came out with a book that I would say probably lasted like 12 or 13 issues. That is an Asian American who gets superpowers, and a lot of the things that you talked about he deals with in the book that you read, he deals with, but in a DC universe kind of a thing. So bringing back characters that are like Chinese stereotypes and dealing with all of the fact that at one point in the DC universe that stuff was there, and brings in a lot of other Chinese characters for the DCU if you like that. So I'd recommend that. And then for Jamie, I have to ask, I've never read a Cassandra Cain book, but I know at one point I love the character when I have interacted with her. At some point she learns how to talk. Do you think that broke the character? Because I know that it's such a key part of her early stuff.
So when it first happened, because it was done in a very interesting way, like she's learning to talk very gradually, and that was all. And then she gets an encounter with this mentalist, this psychic guy who was like being used by the mob, and she rescues him. And in a panic, he's like, oh, you can't talk. I could see what your mind's messed up. I'll fix you. And there's this whole period where she has to relearn how to fight because all of her ability to read people is just completely gone because now it's all language. And that was a very interesting, another arc of her overcoming another challenge. So yeah, how they did it, because they did it in an interesting way, it worked. And she still remains very taciturn, which is good. Surgically directed words.
Okay, anything else before we move on? Well, then let's do another round of favorite origin stories. Robyn, will you start?
Sure. My next one is one I read a while ago, but it was the first time I had come across a trans superhero. I don't know if you guys can see this, but the title of the book is Alters, and she kind of has her coming out, so to speak, as she also discovers her powers. So whenever her powers manifest themselves, she also becomes her true self. And aside from her origin as a hero, you also get a lot of background into just her life as a person as well, and the things that she deals with. One, trying to save the world, and trying to wrestle with how to come out to her family, not just as a superhero, but also as a trans person. And so it's kind of a metaphor also because she's like leading two lives, the superhero and the average person, but also the person that she is and the person that the world thinks that she is. And so you get to see kind of her grappling with that and struggling with these two sides of herself, her superhero side, which is more representative of her actual self, but also isn't, because she's also just a normal person, and dealing with, you know, just the interactions of and the conflicts of that. So I think that and it was the first time I personally had come across reading a trans superhero. There have been more since then, but this is one of my favorites because I really like the adventure, but I also really like a lot of character development as well, and you get that a lot, and to get to see and understand the perspective of a marginalized person in this way was really interesting to me, and I thought it was just really well done. I know the writer is not a trans person himself, but the colorist on the story is, and she worked as a sensitivity reader and an editor to help the writer with the representation of the story. And I thought that they included so many things that superhero fans would enjoy, just from the story of her kind of like fighting the bad guy, but then also a lot of things that like normal people who are dealing with, you know, just hard conversations with their family and with the world kind of deal with as well. So I this is definitely up there in one of my favorites.
Okay. Steve?
I was thinking between a couple different characters, but I think I'll go with Adam Warlock on this one. The thing that I find interesting, and I know there was a whole thing where Kirby had his own idea of where to go versus what Lee wanted to do, which is what ended up happening. But I'm going to kind of just go with like the main published version at this point. I like the idea that Adam Warlock was a Frankenstein's monster who ended up being not the monster. The monsters were the creator. And with the whole idea that Adam Warlock, when he was created, was too advanced for his creators to accept, because they were the ones who were kind of driven by their own ambitions, and Warlock just didn't care about any of that. He just wanted to be left alone. This kind of followed with this whole, you know, almost I want to say childhood period, you know, where he didn't know what he was, and of course he advances through going through a chrysalis and creating a cocoon around himself, and then coming out as a more advanced being, which I just find it so interesting. All of his different incarnations, you know, come out different every time they come out of the cocoon, and so that pretty much allows you to make him kind of whatever he wanted. But I think the version that is pretty much most people's favorite and is the one that is best remembered is the 70s version, where he just basically is Elric of Melniboné in space. I just absolutely dig that, with the vampiric soul gem that he's trying to control, and it's just really interesting. And at the same time, it's like, you know, he's going through these planets, you know, dealing with the Universal Church of Truth, and he's finding all of this insane stuff, trying not to lose his mind. But, you know, he's going steadily crazy because the world around him is insane and he can't keep up with it. And it's just really, really amazing. And then you have the whole thing where the villain is his future self, and what he ends up going into when he becomes fully insane, and then having to commit a cosmic suicide to defeat him, and just bizarro stuff like that. But you know, he kind of gets better. He goes through he dies and comes back to life better. And you know, and you have various different versions, but it's just, this is a crazy character. Nobody knew what to do with him until like the mid-70s, and then it just was bonkers, and that makes him such an interesting character.
Okay, Jenny?
I'm gonna go super mainstream. Wolverine. I love Wolverine's origin story. Told over and over and over and over again. And it's always there's something changed, but it's always the basic. You've got a very early mutant whose healing factor ensures that you can survive pretty much anything. And you sink him in a tub and put adamantium in his skeleton, and you're shocked when he isn't not liking them. and goes various forms of berserker rage on you. I think where they do the most interesting takes is not necessarily putting him in the vat and putting him in the adamantium. That is pretty consistent, but it's what he does when he's out, when he breaks out. You know, is he found by Alpha Flight? Yes, sometimes. Does he wander around till some Japanese chick finds him? Yes, sometimes. He has this whole, you know, pick a Wolverine, spin the wheel. What's his origin going to be today? But it's always interesting, and he's incredibly brave. My husband, and we're talking. I mean, now there's so many different people in the X-Men that there's probably is somebody braver, and there probably is somebody more tragic. But my husband feels that, and I agree, that Wolverine is the bravest X-Men, and Rogue is the most tragic. And he is brave. I mean, because one of the things that I can't remember which comic now, somebody reasonably new to the team says, "Does it hurt every time when the claws come out?" He says, "Every time." Every time. Okay. He can control it. He doesn't have to pull the claws, but that's how he saves people. That's how he protects people. That's how he keeps Sabretooth from eating everybody. So I love Wolverine. He is my hands down my number one favorite. And like, there just isn't an origin story I won't read and reread. I'm tired of Batman's origin story. It's like, it's okay. We already know you're poor, pitiful you. We've got it. Check. Bats. Woo. It's hard to make that interesting now. However, like, we're headed for like 100 years later. It's like we know it, but somehow they manage to do little twists every time they reboot Wolverine. And it's just always really interesting and really cool, and how they bring in new characters because, oh, Wolverine knew this guy 50 years ago. So Wolverine for the win.
Jamie?
Okay, well, my hand has been played. We'll have to talk about Carol Danvers now. I'm gonna speed run this because the thing I love about Carol Danvers and her many origins is we have a character that keeps getting through, publisher mandate or writer necessity or someone deciding to use this character a certain way. It winds up having tragedy after tragedy and misfortune pile on, but the character somehow continues forward, and not just the character in a publication sense, but the character, because all of these tragedies pile up on this woman who is, starts off as already, like, when we first see her, like back in the 70s in the original Captain Marvel stuff, the Kree guy, is already like, she's an accomplished person. She's a, depending upon what she's like a full bird colonel in the Air Force. She's a fighter pilot. And then, we're gonna like merge you with like half of the biology of a Kree person, and you have blackouts and split personalities, and then that'll be fine. And then like your personal life is gonna get destroyed, and then you wind up joining the Avengers, which you think would be great, but then Avengers 200 happens, which we're not going to talk about. Then you wind up plopped down in another portion of the world just long enough for like Rogue to like steal your powers and personality and mind and dump you in a river. And then the X-Men will save you, and then you'll get taken to space and like, tortured by like bug aliens like the Brood. But you'll come out of that with like amazing superpowers, and then you'll be binary. But then we'll forget about you for a while, but then we'll bring you back when your powers are for some reason getting worse, for some unexplicable reason. Then we'll slam you back to the Avengers and make you an alcoholic, because gosh darn if alcoholism isn't a great way to add character. And then, but she recovers and gets through every single bit of this and keeps coming back in a better position. And then eventually is like, Captain Marvel, finally kind of taking over the position that the character role of which she was the distaff counterpart to back like 20, 30, 40 years ago. And she's still around. And that lesson of perseverance and just overcoming everything in your path that is why I love Carol Danvers and her many, many origins. Lecture over. Thank you.
Layla, what about you?
Connor Kent. And I know that's not, going way back into the old times, but almost a decade ago now, I was writing this short story called Teaching a Clone to Love. And it was right around this time that I actually was reading a lot of fan fiction, and I happened upon all these fictions that were coming out about, this new Superboy. And that was part of the new inception of Titans. And I'm like, okay, stop, hold the presses, stop everything. I got to go read. So then I just went to my local comic shop, which we are fortunate in Mason City to have 2 of them. And then I went and I'm like, okay, I've got to, read. Whoever came up with this idea, brilliance. But to take 2 sworn enemies like Superman and Lex Luthor and pieces of their DNA and create a clone from them, and then pretty much have it where they have to figure out what they're going to do with this clone. I mean, as I'm reading, it's like, okay, Superman's really not, showing that he's very sensitive to this new life form and everything. And we all know what will happen if Lex Luthor gets a hold of him, because that's like, probably what he's always wanted is if he could have ever corrupted Superman. Well, here's the perfect opportunity here to corrupt the closest thing to Superman. And then watching these other Titans as they're embracing him and teaching him and not treating him like he's some clone or some lab experiment. They really taught him compassion and how to use his powers for good. Not, the person who should have been his father figure, but these other teens who have come together and are really, reaching out and being like, we don't care how you were created. You're just like us. Join us. That just to me showed what the power of having positive people around you, people who accept you, people who are willing to look past, hey, you've got, the most brilliant supervillain pretty much out there is, one of your dads, and, really embrace that other side of him where it doesn't matter what DNA he has, he can still be a positive force. And I just loved that. Love that comic.
And Ange.
I promise you I like more than just characters created by Steve Ditko, but I'm going to talk about
he made a lot of good ones.
The reboot of Hawk and Dove. I'll briefly talk about the original Hawk and Dove. So it's 2 brothers, one of whom is sort of conservative and a war hawk, hence Hawk, and one who's a pacifist. And they get their powers because their dad is going to be killed, and they're locked in a room by the people that are going to kill the father. And they just wish that they could help. And a mysterious voice comes and says, do you want power? If you want power, I'll give it to you, but based upon your personality. And so Hawk becomes very hot-headed and Dove becomes much more pacifist. In the post-crisis, I would say, if you think about 1987 to 1990 for DC, there's just this explosion of creativity as they're rethinking the universe, and a lot of things are being remade. And so they redo Hawk and Dove, but with Dove as a woman and obviously not related to Hawk. And in the course of that story, you find out that it's not really war and peace or pacifism and aggressive. It's actually order and chaos. And so they just weave right in the Lords of Order and the Lords of Chaos, that Hawk is actually chaos and Dove is actually order. And that just is such a brilliant move to really just lock these people into the DCU. And then as you go along even more, you find out that it's an experiment done by one Lord of Order and one Lord of Chaos that have actually fallen in love and wondering, can there be some sort of peace or truce between these two? Let's do an experiment on Earth with these 2 people that maybe we can do. But then it turns out that Dawn, the original Dove, isn't a good enough receptacle for order. And so they decide they're just going to kill him. So you may remember at the end of Crisis on Infinite Earths, he gets killed. He saves a little girl and a building falls on him and he's dead. And you find out in the Hawk and Dove comic that, you know, the Lords of Order decided at that point, we're just going to take his powers away from him and give them to this woman who has to rescue her mother who is in danger. And so Hawk has to deal with a lot of stuff where it's like, oh, she's my new partner and I'm working very well with her. And it's actually like a relatively healthy relationship, but she's kind of why my brother died, because they took the powers away from my brother and gave them to her. And then there's always like, are they or are they not in love with each other, right? And are their feelings real or not real? Because it's this experiment from these two beings that are sort of in love with each other. I'm not going to mention, although I am now going to mention Armageddon 2001. That never happened, because I really wish these two characters could sort of come back from that. But it's a really nice little fun series, and I think it sort of is emblematic of, you know, when you think about that time in DC. You know, Wally West is the Flash. John Byrne comes on to Batman. The Suicide Squad gets invented, right? Like, there's just this explosion of creativity of old IP, but really freshened up. And as crazy as it sounds, Hawk and Dove is probably my favorite of all of those things.
Okay. Well, I was, as I said, weighing several, and I'm going to go with one that has been retconned into oblivion, and I'm probably never going to get over it. Paul Levitz and Keith Giffen did the best they could with the Pocket Universe when Superboy was yanked out of DC continuity. But in the process, they sacrificed one of their most poignant origin stories ever, and that's the origin story of Mon-El. And since then, they don't know what to do with him. He's been Valor, he's all over the place, and he had a perfect role as Superboy's older brother of the heart. He crash landed on Earth. He's from the planet Daxam, where people have the same abilities as Kryptonians do. So he has superpowers on Earth. And there are hints in the ship that he's been to Krypton. And so Superboy jumps to the conclusion that he must be his older brother. And his parents must have launched another rocket earlier. And so they get to be really close and really good friends. And then I forget exactly what it is that causes Superboy to think Mon-El's just pretending that he's my brother. I mean, never mind that it was your idea that he was your brother, but let's go with that. And so he sets up a trick. He takes lead boulders, which are no threat to Superboy, and spray paints them bright green, like kryptonite, and exposes Mon-El to them. And when Mon-El is ill and says he's dying, Superboy's like, ha, 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 they're not really kryptonite. They're lead. You're a fraud. I've unmasked you. Well, except the pain of the lead exposure is bringing Mon-El's memories back. And he visited Krypton. He met Superboy's parents. And now he's dying. And there's no cure for lead poisoning. So the only way a guilt-ridden Superboy can save his best friend is to project him into the Phantom Zone with the worst criminals in the history of Krypton. And Mon-El spends 1,000 years in the Phantom Zone. Saturn Girl invents a serum in what was then the 30th century that can let him be out of the zone for short periods, but it's not good enough. And he is actually instrumental in the death of Lightning Lad because he observes what's going on. But that's like, I could do a whole panel just on that story, so I won't go there. But finally, Brainiac 5 figures out how to get Mon-El out of the Phantom Zone permanently. He just has to keep taking this serum. And when Superboy was yanked out of DC continuity, Mon-El's story went with him. And so I've always hated that, and I've never gotten over it, besides which Silver Age Superboy was one of my first book boyfriend crushes. And so therefore, the obliteration of Silver Age Superboy is just not acceptable. Anyway, we have about 10 minutes left. Do you all want to do a lightning round, or do you want to talk about something that came up in the course of the discussion? Yeah, Ange.
Yeah, can I just say, Layla, I don't know if you know this, but Jeff Johns is the one who thought up the Lex Luthor Superman origin. And he actually did it when he was a fan and wrote in a letter that was printed in one of the Superman comics that, as a fan, back when they didn't know who Superboy was, like, I think it would be a great idea if it was Superman and Lex Luthor. And they didn't do that originally. And then when Jeff Johns became a pro, he said, you know, I like that idea I had as a fan. I'm going to put it in. And so rewrote continuity to like his own fanfic, except now it's profic. So really a fascinating origin, even to the origin. But I love that pick. That was a great pick.
Yeah.
I love that story. And now I'm going to have to go read more about that because I did not know that. Thank you.
Well, and they used Connor that way in the Titans TV show.
Mhm.
They did not play up the Lex Luthor angle to the extent that I think.
Yeah, originally I think Carl Kiesel had said it was Paul Westfield who was the guy running Cadmus at the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Anybody want to add anything? Toss another one out real quick. Robyn.
I'll toss out one really quick. And this is kind of a cheat because it's a real life superhero, but it is a comic. So, or a graphic novel, I should say. So this is a graphic biography of Frederick Douglass. And my lighting is just horrible. You can only see it
If you hold it at that
Hold
angle,
it like that, it's perfect. It's
just like
crisp.
that.
That angle, yeah.
So this is a biography of Frederick Douglass in graphic novel form. And one of the things that I love about this is a lot of times people learn about his history starting when he was an abolitionist and an orator. And I consider him a real life superhero because I feel like he literally changed the face of this country. But this goes back to one of the works that goes back to the beginning and talks about him learning to read. And one of my favorite parts of this book, he was sent off because he he was so defiant, he got sent to another plantation. And one of the overseers tried to subdue him. And we can't curse, right? Can I use the wheel of F, Nancy?
Sure. We're so far into it, I think it's okay at this point.
He whipped that man's ass. And so, like, when that happened, I was like, yes, that is like the hero origin story right there. And he was like, I got to get out of here. And I love to read, and learning about his journey to learn to read and the importance of it in his life and how it drove him to be so passionate in what he did, especially as a library worker. I connect with that passion and that fervor for reading. And I love this this adaptation. The art is beautiful. It touches, like I was saying, further back into kind of his origins. So yeah, this is one of my favorites.
Okay. Well, let's do a lightning round. And that's really, really quick because we've got about 5 minutes left and then we need to wrap up. So, Steve, do you want to give us something real quick?
Yeah, I'll go with since we're on Cosmic, I'll go with Janus Vel, who was the son of Captain Marvel and his lover Elysius. And I love that he inherited the same cosmic awareness, and then later on, while he's trying to do good, the cosmic awareness gradually drove him completely insane, and he couldn't handle it. And then later on, he had a redemption arc at the end, and unfortunately got ruined. But he was really, really great under Peter David for a while.
Okay, Jenny?
The first female Robin, whose name escapes me.
Carrie Kelly.
Yes. I love that whole graphic novel with Batman dying and her being a good soldier. I just love that.
Okay. Jamie?
We're gonna do all-time great Spider-Man. Just one of the classics. Can't really go past. With great power comes great responsibility.
Okay. Layla?
Punisher. Gotta go with Punisher. And I'm probably one of the few that will go back and, watch that old Dolph Lundgren 1990s Punisher movie and still love it as much as the one with Thomas Jane. But I love all things Punisher.
Okay. Ange?
It's a little bit of a cheat, but I'm going to do the reboot of the Creeper back in the post-crisis era. Because one of the things they did in that is they said that the gangsters pumped him full of a psychedelic drug. And unfortunately, when he reactivates his powers, it also reactivates that drug. And so it was an explanation why he's so crazy when he's the Creeper. But it also means that when he comes out of it, he doesn't remember what he did because he was like under the influence. Unfortunately, that origin never really stuck, but I thought it was brilliant as a way to explain something I never quite understood.
Okay. And Robyn.
I'm also gonna do a little bit of a cheat. I'm gonna say the DC Inc. line of books. They are mostly original graphic novels under the DC YA imprint. So some of them are kind of like soft retcons of some popular characters. Like there's Catwoman, Harley, Barbara Gordon, Oracle, Poison Ivy get retellings. Raven gets a retelling, but there are also new characters that are created. Galaxy, another trans superhero. You Brought Me the Ocean features a queer character who ends up being the son of, I forget the I'm blanking on the guy with the big fish head that's Aquaman's nemesis.
Black
Oh,
Manta.
Black Manta, yes. His son, and a couple of other new superheroes that are in the universe, but create these new characters so the kids get kind of familiar with the overall DC continuity, but it creates a new character. It allows them to introduce queer characters, characters of color, but also introduces them to the greater DC continuity. But the heroes generally that we know, other than those ones that I mentioned before, are kind of introduced in the background, because you get to get a brand new origin story with these brand new characters. So I love that whole line.
Okay. Have I been around? Did I get everybody this round?
yeah.
Okay. Well, I will go with the origin of Green Lantern Jessica Cruz. She had been through a traumatic experience involving the death of a friend, and a power ring chose her, and she was freaking out. And she encountered the Justice League, and I'm now forgetting how, but it was Batman who talked her down, who helped her find her footing and comforted her. And that's a side of Batman we don't get to see very often. And then Jessica went on to become, she's probably my favorite Green Lantern. So we are actually right at time. So let's wrap up. We'll go around. Please tell people where they can find information about you, if you have a website or social media. If you have a new, recent, or upcoming release that you would like to promote, this is the time to do that. Gini?
www.ginikoch.com. I'm all over Facebook. If you want to sign up for my free newsletter, Pick Me Up, you can do that from my main Facebook fan page, Hairspray and Rock and Roll. I'm also on X, Twitter, Blue Sky, and Pinterest. My most recent release was Falls Girl, a mystery co-written with Phoebe Bayless from Ginger Blue Publishing, which came out 2 months ago. And upcoming, I have another release from Falls Girl, this time from Ginger Blue. This time writing is A.E. Stanton, The Natural Born Outlaws, Legend of Belladonna, Book 1, and that comes out in June.
Okay. Jamie?
You can find me easy enough, www.jbgarnerwrites.com. Also, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Blue Sky. Just look for me there. Project-wise, I have a new release literally coming out tomorrow from when this was recorded, so the 30th of April. It is a superhero book, Indomitable, the first book of the Push Chronicles, being published by Ginger Blue Publishing. But that will be, by the time people see this, it should be available.
Okay. Layla?
Well, you can find me on Wix, Layla Dorine, author at Wix.com. But mostly I am on Facebook, but mostly you can find me at Rainbow Lyrics and Mellow Mushrooms. That is my blog. Now that I've replaced my computer that decided to blow up a few months ago, it will be back to daily blog posts. I do have 2 releases coming up. One of them is Saint Sinner, which is book 3 of my Rolling Joker series. That will be out at the end of May. And then at the end of June, I have Seafoam and Saltwater Taffy. That is my Pride Cruise book for this year coming out. And so that will be part of a multi-authored, multi-book collection that are all Pride Cruises.
Ange?
I'm on X, Twitter, and Blue Sky at Dr. Ange70, and I just celebrated my 16th anniversary of running a Supergirl-focused blog called Comic Box Commentary, but if you type Supergirl blog into Google, at the top.
Okay. Robyn?
My podcast is Diversity Issue Pod. Diversity Issues, where we talk about diversity in indie comics. You can find us wherever you get your podcast. Also online at diversityissues.libsyn.com.
Steve?
Yeah, you can find me at Twitter at Shadewing, and my projects are on Revelation Comic. In addition to that, I should have, we're kind of on hiatus, but I'm doing Cinemas Crusaders, which is a regular pod on like old movies, you know, things from like 10 years and older, things like that. And I have other projects coming up, but nothing I can announce right now.
Well, and you can always find me here on ConTinual. My website is nancynorthcott.com. I'm on Twitter and Facebook. My Facebook author page doesn't get a lot of, I don't pay a lot of attention to it. So the best place to commune with me is on Twitter, where I'm at Nancy Northcott. My next release will be Traitor. That's Traitor, not someone who vends goods, traitor. Traitor Mage's Fate. It's one of my Light Mage Wars paranormal romances, and it will be out at the end of June. So I'd like to thank everybody on the panel for participating this evening. Thank you to everyone who's watching us, and thank you to our sponsors, Heroes Aren't Hard to Find and Heroes Convention. For more information about them, visit heroesonline.com.